As a witch on the internet, I get asked a lot of questions, and I love answering as many of them as I can, but I feel like some of them really need their own dedicated video. And today, I wanted to talk about one of the most enduring questions I have ever been asked. How do I take myself from a beginner practitioner to someone more experienced? And today's video is going to be all about it. So for anyone who's new here, hello, my name is Hearth. Thank you so much for choosing this video, and if you've been here for a long time, thank you so much for coming back. I always appreciate it. Now, if we were to look at the world of witchcraft, I think it looks a lot like a pyramid. You get a lot of people at the bottom section of this pyramid that are beginners to witchcraft. They're just starting out, perhaps they were inspired by a movie or a TV show, perhaps they found a book in a charity shop, or they found a book in, I don't know, Urban Outfitters or something, and it inspired them to want to start learning. Above them are people who are a little bit more experienced in their practice. Perhaps they've spent a couple of weeks doing it, they've realised that this is something that they do want to start working on long term, and then above them are the more advanced practitioners still, those who've probably been doing it for about a year. And you'll notice as we go up the pyramid, the numbers are getting less and less and less. And at the very top of that pyramid are the people that have been practicing for the majority of their lives. Those that have been practicing for 50, 60 years and are very experienced in their magical tradition. The numbers start dwindling because as people begin their journey, they realise maybe this takes a little bit more effort than they were expecting, or perhaps they become stagnant in their practice and they decide that it just isn't for them. But there's a lot of people who struggle to make the leap from being a beginner practitioner to being more advanced. And if they get stuck in this period of time for too long, they can often feel like they aren't good enough in their practice, that witchcraft is too expensive, that they don't understand how to progress. And so I wanted to cover a few options today that I think could be really, really useful and that massively helped me make that leap from being a beginner to the craft to being someone that is at least a little bit more experienced. And I still don't consider myself to be adept in this practice at all. I'm totally still learning. So the first piece of advice that I can give is to make sure that your foundational practices are effective. I have found this to be one of the main reasons why people stop practicing witchcraft. They feel like all of a sudden their magic just stops manifesting, and so they go, well, clearly this isn't for me, or clearly this isn't real, I'm just not going to do it anymore. But having a really good foundational practice means that if we go through a slump, if we're struggling at any point, if we're changing up our style of practice, we still have a foundation to build up on. It's the equivalent of building a house on a stable foundation versus building it in a bog. One of them is going to sink and crumble a lot quicker than the other. And one thing that I've commonly found to happen is that when people are really passionate about something at the very, very start, they're very excited, they've got a lot of energy for it, or they have a lot of desperation for something to manifest, it'll manifest pretty easily with very little experience and skill because you're putting a lot of energy into it. Even if you don't understand how or why, you're still doing it. But then once you progress a little bit further in your magical practice and maybe that urgent need for a response isn't there, but you want to practice something, or perhaps that initial desire to practice is gone and now you want to develop it further, all of a sudden your workings just stop manifesting. A lot of people can take this as a sign that witchcraft isn't real, that magic doesn't work, or that it simply isn't for them, but really it's just that you're not in a high energy situation anymore. If you're not in a high energy situation, then you need to be adding that energy through other means, and that's where our foundational practices come in. Ideally, I would recommend learning some kind of mind calming or meditation technique, visualization, or some alternative such as writing down your desired intentions, singing it, speaking it, drawing a picture, whatever that might be, centering and grounding, energy sensing, and energy manipulation. These are what I would consider the core practices that we can then build up on as time goes on. Once we have these practices in place and we are practicing them again and again and again, then it means that when we are struggling with energy, we have low energy, we maybe aren't feeling 100%, or perhaps we're doing workings where it isn't a high energy working, it's something where we can be a little bit more calm in that situation. we are still going to be able to manifest results. It essentially stops you from having this really, really high at the start of your magical practice and then crashing as soon as you don't have a high energy situation. It's going to make everything a lot more balanced, a lot easier, and it's going to make your practice so much more efficient in the long run. Now, the second piece of advice that I can give is to practice. Now, this might seem so obvious, but I've met a lot of people who want the outcome of practicing witchcraft without actually doing any of the work. Now, I don't like saying it, but I do think that some people aren't necessarily cut out for witchcraft. That's not to say that they aren't able to do it if they choose to. It's that a lot of people come into witchcraft expecting it to be a quick fix for all of life's problems, and they aren't willing to put in any of the time and effort. And ultimately, if you aren't willing to give the energy to it, you're never going to get a response back out of it, especially not in the long run. It is very much about putting the time in, making sure that you're learning your foundational practices, but then also learning a little bit of history of witchcraft from around the world, maybe learning a little bit about the witch trials and why they're still significant. Maybe it's about learning deities or how to work with spirits. Maybe it's learning about the plants that you're connecting with. Witchcraft is very much a craft. It's something that we're always learning and developing, and in order to do that, you actually have to be part of it. Now, by this, I don't mean that you need to be carrying out rituals every single day or several times an hour. What I mean is that you need to be present in your craft. You need to be living it. That could be in the small gestures that you're doing on a daily basis, whether that's saying good morning to your spirits every day or stirring intention into your cup of tea, whether that's choosing herbs specifically while you're cooking that have intention, whether it is doing meditation and mindfulness, whether it's inner work or dream magic, astral projection, or just reading a book, listening to an audiobook. These things keep us grounded and keep us active in our magical practice. I have found the biggest thing that means people fail at the start of their journey is that they go in all guns blazing and then they just stop. And then they come back to it 5-6 months later and they expect to be able to be just as successful as they were 5 or 6 months ago, when they've not interacted with any of their spirits, they've not communed with any of their deities, they've not connected with the land in any way, shape or form in those last months. And this is where practice kind of becomes stagnant and just fades away, because if you aren't willing to engage in the craft of witchcraft, you're probably looking for magic in the wrong place. Now, I'll be the first one to say that I don't think you need to be doing daily magical practice. If you want to, that's fantastic. But the main thing is to be present in your craft. Whatever it is that you have the ability to do, as long as you are actively engaging in your craft, that's all that really matters. It doesn't have to be something extravagant, but it needs to be something that grounds you into your magical practice. Otherwise, you just end up drifting away from it. And it's one of the main reasons why I see people leave witchcraft, is that they say it is just too much work, I don't want to deal with it, I want what I can get out of it and I don't want to put anything into it. And sadly, that kind of selfish approach, I think, is becoming more and more common. And it's really important, if you want to work with deities, if you want to work with spirits, to do so respectfully and to not expect something for nothing. And that is what a lot of people tend to miss. Now, the next piece of advice is actually the biggest of them all. So if you're only going to take on one piece of advice, have this be it, because genuinely this is so important. And it's what I recommend to literally everyone, because it is that important. Ask why. This is useful whether you are a beginner, whether you are an experienced practitioner. I don't care if you've been practicing for 2 days or whether you've been practicing for 30 years. It doesn't matter. Asking the whys is so incredibly valuable and you won't regret it. And this is really the main difference between someone who's a beginner and someone who's advanced. So as an example, you're a beginner practitioner and you really want a protection spell. So you have a look on the internet and you find a few spells, but you don't have any items for it. And then you go through a few spell books and you find a couple that you think could work. So you go out and you buy the items that you need to do this working word for word. You follow it, everything is fantastic, it manifests incredible. But this could have cost you a lot of money, and it probably is a style of working that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with. Maybe you wish you could have done things slightly differently, but you don't really know how. Or maybe you would have liked to include your deity in this work, but it actually called for a different deity, and that made you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Whereas a more advanced practitioner maybe wouldn't go to a spell book at all. They'd maybe look through their collection of items, they'd see what they had, and they would put together a spell from scratch. And this is why is probably the most important question in witchcraft, because it allows you to have a deeper understanding of what it is that you're doing. So the next time you're looking through a spell book, try to figure out why. And this is going to help build up a bigger correspondence of ingredients. This is going to help you to understand the world around you just a little bit more, and it means that you can start dismantling spells. And once you start picking apart the reasoning behind a spell, that means you can take all of that dismantled information and you can smush it together in a different way, in a different style of working. Quickly, you'll go from having to rely on spellbooks to never touching them, and it makes such a difference in your magical practice. One thing that I will consistently get asked is, why is witchcraft so expensive? And ultimately, it doesn't have to be expensive, but it's really easy to rack up costs when you're doing spells out of a spell book, and every single spell contains 5 or 6 different ingredients, crystals, herbs, items, candles that you don't have in your collection, and then every time you're doing a spell, you're having to buy more and more and more things. Whereas really, once you get past the beginner stage, witchcraft is actually really, really affordable because you're using what you have in your collection. How do we actually ask the whys? So I've grabbed this spellbook. This is Candle Burning Rituals by Marie Bruce. It's not my favourite book, but I don't actually have that many spell books, so we've just had to go for this one. And I've grabbed this working right here. This is House Blessing Protection Ritual. And let's have a look at the ingredients that are involved. So this is designed to protect your boundaries. You need 4 tea lights, 4 garden lanterns or pumpkins and turnips. You need a pentacle and you need a box of sea salt, and it's carried out on the full moon. Now this working in particular says, this spell will protect the perimeters of your property, helping to keep intruders out. It will also add the positive energies around your home. Charge all 4 tea lights on your pentacle with the powers of protection against all things. Once they are fully empowered, take them outside with the lanterns, matches, and a box of sea salt. Begin in the north or 12 o'clock position of your property, light the candle, and place it in the lantern, saying the following. Then you would scatter the salt from that point until you reach the east or 3 o'clock point of your property. Set down the lantern, light the candle, and repeat. Continue to scatter salt until you reach the 6 o'clock point and repeat the process. Do this for the west, and now continue until you are back at the northernmost point. If you have to go through the house at all to do this, then simply scatter a pinch or 2 of salt along the walls. When you reach your starting point, you should be standing within a protective circle of salt, with 4 lanterns lighting the compass points. Leave the candles to burn down. Now, I really like this working. I think it's super well-rounded. I would carry this out myself. But the whole point of doing this is to figure out the whys so we can dismantle it. So as someone who's been doing this for a while, this is how I would break it down. I would look at all of the different ingredients. So you've got 4 tea light candles, specifically 4. Tea light candles are also white, so we're going to figure out why that's significant. Now, the tea light candles are designed to represent the 4 elemental directions, so north, south, east, and west. So the 4 is to represent the 4 compass points. White is also useful as it is a universal colour. It is considered to be representative of all things, and so because of that, it's really useful in all kinds of workings. So if the only colour of candle that you can have is white, then that is going to be really effective. The 4 garden lanterns or pumpkins and turnips are typically used for protection of those tea lights, to make sure the wind doesn't blow them out and to make sure that nothing is going to be burned if those tea lights come in contact with it. Specifically though, pumpkins and turnips are protective against spirits, especially when they are carved in faces. Just think of the use of them during Halloween or Samhain. They're very protective in nature, so you could amplify this working further by switching the lantern out for pumpkins or turnips. You then have a pentacle. Now, the pentacle is a symbol of protection. It is unity of all of the elements. It's a unity of balance. And so it allows us to work with it as a powerful symbol to energize situations as well as to offer protection. Many practitioners, it's hit somewhere, including myself, it's wrapped in all of the threads, will use a pentacle and they'll wear it on a daily basis for additional protection. Sea salt is highly protective in nature. It is considered a cleansing agent, and so it is commonly used in protection style workings as a way of marking a border, an edge of a territory, for instance, where nothing unwanted is able to cross that threshold spiritually. Now, I think it is important to mention, they don't say it here, that salt does kill the earth. And so you'll likely find that wherever you've marked that salt down, you'll find that the earth does die in that location. So once you've been practicing for a while, you might be able to think of an alternative. Perhaps eggshell powder, being highly protective, could be worked with for this property. Perhaps you could use chalk that has been charged with your energy for protection as a way of marking out that space as well. Lots of alternatives here, but that is something that you can learn and develop over time. The full moon is typically used because it is a point of high power, and so that is the kind of power that we're going to be drawing on in this working. It also means that we can effectively work outside without having to use light, especially if it is a nice clear night. Now, once you know all of that reasoning, we can then start figuring out why things are done the way they're done. So the candles are placed on top of the pentacle because it is a symbol of protection and also a symbol of unity and power. All of that energy is coming together, and so you're using it as a way of empowering those objects. If you wanted to, you could take it a step further and put that pentacle inside your house somewhere as a way of offering internal protection as well as those candles working externally. We're working in a clockwise motion because clockwise or deersil is designed to be drawing things in. When you are opening a circle for your ritual purposes, you're doing it in a clockwise motion. When you are walking and delineating the edge of a compass, you are doing it in a clockwise motion. This is really useful for applying something, whereas if we were to be removing something, you would be working anti-clockwise or widdershins. So just that simple motion is really powerful and potent. And then once you've dismantled all of that, you can say, okay, well, I don't have a pentacle. Well, what was the pentacle used for? The pentacle was so that you could charge all of those candles. You can charge them without requiring the pentacle. You can just do that yourself. Well, I don't have any sea salt. Okay, well, that's fine. If you have children's chalk, you can be charging that and using that instead. You might not even need to use any kind of salt because what the salt is doing is acting as a boundary. If you can delineate that boundary yourself by walking it repeatedly, then that's an alternative to having to use salt. If you don't have turnips, then you can say, okay, well, I don't necessarily need turnips, but I can just use the lanterns, and then maybe I could add a sigil in there that represents protection. And so really quickly, we can start taking things out of that working, changing it up, switching it round. You can have this exact same working be used to protect a smaller circle. Say, for instance, you want to do a ritual with a group. You don't need to protect a large property. Instead, you just need to protect the inner space that that group is going to be working in. Or maybe you only want to do this inside your room. You don't need to be doing this around a big space. You can do this around a little space too. And then really quickly, we can start taking workings that we find in books like this and making them your own. And genuinely, the first step from advancing from a beginner practitioner to a more advanced practitioner is to start adapting the spells. You don't need to start by just going in and making a spell from scratch. But if you start with the whys, and then the next thing is adapting those spells. So if I flick through and find another one that I think could be useful. Let's have a look, see. Okay, so this one here, just up here, is called To Encourage Sweet Dreams. To help call the dream of your choice, you need a dark blue candle, lavender oil, pen and paper. It's suggested to do this during the full moon. As evening falls, take the candle and dress it with lavender oil. Carry the candle to your bedroom. On a slip of paper, write down the type of dream you want to have. Concentrate hard on experiencing that dream. This is known as dream incubation. Now light the candle and put the spell paper next to it. When the candle is almost burned down, your room will be filled with the scent of lavender. Burn the spell paper and get ready for bed. Snuff out the candle, get into bed and wait for your dream to come. Now you might read this and you might go, oh, well, I don't have a dark blue candle. Now dark blue candles are typically used for things that are connected with the subconscious mind. They're also commonly used for communication workings. But if you don't have a dark blue candle, you could switch that out for a white candle. If you are allergic to lavender, then lavender oil is not something that you're going to want to use. So then it's about going through certain books, such as these. So we have reference books, which are going to give you alternatives. So for instance, this is Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. I swear by this book. I absolutely love it. We then also have Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Crystal, Gem and Metal Magic. That's a different book on the subject. But if you were to go through a book like this and you've gone, okay, well, I can't use lavender because I'm allergic to it. What else can I use? and we're thinking, okay, what rules over dreams? So we're using the full moon during this working. The moon is very connected with psychic work, with dreams, with divination. So maybe you could use an oil that instead connects with the moon, and you have some options. You have lemon balm, you have eucalyptus, gardenia, you have jasmine, myrrh, sandalwood. There's a lot of options there that are associated with the moon. You also have narcissus as an example of something you could be using for sleep. And so you can really start using books like this to expand your magical knowledge further. If, for instance, you know you can't be burning something inside, if you can create a sigil out of the words that you would want to include in that dream writing, you can wear that sigil, draw it on your skin with an eyeliner pen or an eyebrow pen, and it means that you still have that same energy going into that working. And this is what can make the biggest difference, because it can take something that could be very expensive, having to buy new stuff every single day, to something that is really affordable because you're using what you have. You're going to get to the point where you no longer need to rely on a spell book. If you say that you need a confidence working, you're able to pull from your own knowledge that you really like tiger eye for confidence, you really like the colour orange, and so you can create a confidence charm or a necklace. You can wrap it around a candle or place it around a candle holder with an orange candle in the center that is dressed with confidence oil, that has a sigil carved into the front of it for confidence, and you have a tiger eye stone in front of it, and you can say the words that you want to say, you can light that candle, you can burn it down. No spellbook needed. It is incredibly powerful for this purpose. I'm not sure if any of that made sense because I've had to refilm this section about 15 times because I couldn't get my words out. The next piece of advice that I have is to not get stuck in a rut. It is so easy to do it. You find a style of practice that works and you stick with it. But especially if you are a beginner, this can actually be really detrimental. I'll often be asked, as a beginner, how do I know what type of witch I am? And the answer is always that the type of witch you are is designed to fit your practice, not the other way around. The types of witchcraft are not boxes that we need to squish ourselves into. We need to figure out what works best for us first and choose a description for that practice later. If you like the idea of candle magic, then try candle magic, but don't be afraid to also try green witchcraft or lunar witchcraft. Maybe sea witchcraft or elemental magic reaches out to you. It's really important to not get stuck in a little tiny box, because as time goes on, you're going to find it becoming more and more restrictive, especially if it's the only way that you've learned to practice. It would essentially be like learning to ride a bike all over again when you try and do something else, because the techniques are going to be slightly different. So if you can, try not to only carry out one style of practice. As tempting as it is, it means it's so much harder for us to grow beyond that point when we do get stuck in our comfort zone. And another thing to add here is to not just rely on your own energy. Reach out to other things, work with different spirits and deities if you feel comfortable doing so, and even just expand your practice from just working with the mundane thing. Now, I'm the first one to say that I very easily get stuck in ruts. I also work with my own energy a lot, and I like tactile things. But it's important to not rely on them too heavily, because especially if you don't have a lot of energy or your energy manipulation techniques are not super advanced yet, it's very, very easy to become energetically drained. And when this happens, we don't want to carry out a magical practice. So for instance, if you work with herbs in your magical practice, why not also work with the plant spirits? Build a bond and develop some allies with certain plants of significance that you work with regularly. That way in your magical practice, you're not just working with, say, basil or mugwort. Instead, you're working with the spirit of basil and the spirit of mugwort. It helps elevate your workings, can take some of the energetic pressure off you, and it helps develop your green witchcraft and your green thumb just a little bit more. If you work a lot with candle magic, why not look into working with the fire element, specifically the elementals? These could be a really great benefit to your magical practice. It's not something that you have to do, but it can elevate your practice a little bit further. If you enjoy working with elemental representations during a circle casting, why not also call on the elementals of the 4 directions into workings? Mix and match different elementals for different intentions. If you want something for emotional passion, maybe water and fire. If you want something to keep yourself grounded, then maybe something with the earth element. It's a way of elevating your practice one step above. It doesn't mean that you have to do it all the time or that your practice is better if you do, but it can be a way of developing your practice and your experience a little bit more to even just test it out and see if you like it. If deities are something that really interests you, have a look into them, see which deities really call out to you and which ones don't. If you want to work with servitors or familiars, have a look into it. It's about taking that step outside and knowing that you are capable. And I think, if anything, that is the biggest piece of advice I can give. Well, maybe not biggest, because I think the figuring out the why is probably the most important, but it's about getting to a point where if something went wrong, you would be able to fix it. And that's what we really need to be working on. Is I don't want anyone to be scared of their magical practice. I don't want anyone to be scared of spirits or deities or doing a working in case something goes wrong. I want you to have the tools to be able to fix it if it does. And I think that is such a massive distinction between a beginner and a more experienced practitioner. If something goes wrong and you're a beginner, you'll often reach out to other practitioners because you don't know what to do. A panicked mindset sets in of, oh no, I've messed this up. I'm in a panic mode now. I don't know what to do. Whereas if you are a more experienced practitioner, if something goes wrong, you might still reach out to people. You might still get a little bit panicked, but ultimately you can take a step back from the situation and you have enough skills to be able to implement them to get yourself out of it. And that is so, so important. So make sure that you know your foundational practices, that you can work with your energy effectively. Make sure you have some protection and shielding techniques. Make sure you know how to cleanse a space, perhaps banish something if necessary. If you have these skills in place, you can then branch out into more advanced styles of practice without the fear holding you back. Because ultimately, going back to that pyramid I spoke about at the very, very start of this video, a lot of the people at the very bottom of that pyramid will fall away because the practice simply isn't for them. Some more people will fall away because they don't want to put the time and energy into it. But a lot of people fall away from that practice because they don't have the self-confidence, because they don't feel as though they have the skills to be able to get themselves out of a bad situation. And so they're so scared of working with spirits, they're so scared of carrying out spells and rituals that they simply don't. And I don't want anyone to feel like they're in that situation. So ideally, it is about asking the whys, understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing, avoiding misinformation, and then coming to a point in your practice where if a spell goes wrong, you know what to do to fix it. So I hope that this was useful. If you have any other tips for advancing your practice from being a beginner to someone more advanced, do let us all know down in the comment section. I certainly would absolutely love to know so that I can give better advice to people in the future, because that's the beauty of witchcraft. That's the beauty of everything, actually, I think, is that ultimately no one knows everything. And if someone claims to know everything, they're lying, because there's absolutely no way that any of us can know everything in witchcraft or in life. It just doesn't happen. We're all growing, we're all learning. Make sure that you forgive yourself if things go wrong. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's journey is the same speed as everyone else's. Some people develop their craft really quickly, other people take decades. That doesn't mean that one person is better than the other. And I think these are all really important takeaways, because there is, especially online, such a status within witchcraft of I'm better than you are. And the reality is that you can find someone who's been practicing for 6 months, who is more experienced, more practiced, and more knowledgeable than someone who's been practicing for 50 years. Everyone is so unique. No one is better than everyone else. We are all just going on this journey. So if you did enjoy this video, please give it a like. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down in the comment section. If you've made it to the end of this video, please put some hearts in the comment section and I will try to heart as many of them back as possible. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try to post magical content every single week. And with that being said, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!